Your mother was never the victim, Elena. She was the one who destroyed this family long before I ever walked through that door. I nearly dropped my phone when those words came through the speaker. My stepmother Olivia's voice, sweet, calculated, the same tone she used when she convinced my father to sign over her first chunk of company shares. It's been 12 years since my mother died. 12 years of carrying this weight, this suspicion that something wasn't right. 12 years of watching Olivia smile at charity galas while I wondered if she had poison on her hands. I'm Elena, 28 years old, Harvard grad, and the daughter of Miami's most powerful real estate mogul. On paper, my life looks perfect. Big house in Coral Gables, corner office in the family company, designer clothes, and a father who built an empire from nothing. But here's the thing about paper, it burns. And right now, my entire world is on fire. Let me take you back to 3 weeks ago. I was going through old boxes in my mother's study, the room my father never let anyone touch after she died. I was looking for her old medical records, trying to understand why a healthy 46-year-old woman suddenly had seizures and died within a month. What I found instead made my blood run cold. A receipt from a private lab, a name I recognized, and a transaction that didn't make sense until it made too much sense. You want to know what it's like to realize the person you've been grieving for over a decade might have been murdered? And that the person who did it is sleeping in your mother's bed, running your mother's charity foundation, and calling herself mom to your half-siblings. Am I in the wrong for wanting to destroy her? If you were me, standing in a room full of your mother's memories, holding proof that her death wasn't accidental, what would you do? 3 weeks ago, I was just a daughter trying to understand her mother's death. 3 weeks ago, I still believed my father was the grieving widower who couldn't bear to talk about his first wife. 3 weeks ago, I was naive enough to think the truth would set me free. It hasn't. It's just made me a prisoner of my own anger. Let me start at the beginning, because you need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with here. My father, Victor Reyes, started his real estate company with nothing but a GED and a dream. By the time I was born, he already owned half of downtown Miami. He's the kind of man who walks into a room and everyone stops talking. The kind who can close a deal worth millions while barely raising his voice. The kind who's been written up in Forbes twice, once for his business acumen and once for his tragic personal loss. My mother, Isabella, was his partner in everything. She came from a wealthy Cuban family, but she didn't just marry my father for his ambition. She matched it. She was the one who managed the books, who charmed the investors, who made the company feel like a family instead of a corporation. I remember her laugh, loud, unapologetic, the kind that filled a room. I remember the way she'd dance with my father in the kitchen while dinner burned on the stove. I remember her reading me bedtime stories in Spanish and English, always doing both because she wanted me to remember where we came from. Then came the calls, the headaches she'd dismiss as stress, the weight loss she blamed on her busy schedule. The night I came home from school to find her lying on the bathroom floor, her body shaking violently, and my father already on the phone with an ambulance. I don't know what happened. He kept saying, over and over, like a broken record, "She was fine this morning. She was fine." But she wasn't fine. She'd been losing her hair. Her nails had started to peel. She had bruises that showed up for no reason, and she'd always been the type to bruise easily, but this was different. This was her skin turning pale and her eyes looking hollow and her smile fading until there was nothing left. The doctors said it was a rare autoimmune disorder. They said there was nothing they could have done. They said she died peacefully, surrounded by family. But I was there. I was 16 years old, holding my mother's hand while the machines around her flatlined, and I saw her face. She wasn't peaceful. She looked terrified. And right before she went, she looked at me and whispered something I've never been able to forget. "Trust no one, mi amor." I thought she meant the doctors. I thought she meant the nurses. I never thought she meant my father. Fast forward 2 years. I was 18, starting freshman year at Harvard, when my father called to tell me he was getting remarried. To Olivia, his assistant, a woman who'd been working for the company for exactly 8 months. "Elena, I know this is sudden," he said, his voice careful and measured, the voice he uses when he's about to ask me to do something I don't want to do. "But Olivia makes me happy. We've been through so much, and she's been so supportive." I hope you can find it in your heart to welcome her to the family." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him my mother's body was barely cold, that he was replacing her like she was nothing, that this woman had been going through my mother's closet and sleeping in her sheets while I was trying to figure out how to function without her. But I didn't. I was too young, too scared of losing the only parent I had left, too desperate to keep some shred of normalcy. So I smiled. I flew home for the wedding. I watched my father say "I do" to a woman 30 years his junior, and I forced myself to clap. That was my first mistake. For the next 10 years, I played the game. I graduated from Harvard with honors. I moved back to Miami. I took a position at my father's company, working my way up from the bottom, refusing to use my name to get ahead. I watched Olivia become the face of the family's charitable foundation. I watched her throw lavish parties for Miami's elite. I watched her give birth to 2 children, my half-siblings, who I tried to love despite everything, and I watched my father dote on her like she was the center of the universe. But I never forgot the bruises. I never forgot the seizures. I never forgot my mother's last words. So 3 weeks ago, when I found myself at my mother's old estate in the Keys, the house my father had never sold, the house Olivia had been trying to convince him to give to her sister, I started digging. The house was dusty. It smelled like mothballs and regret. The rooms were exactly how my mother had left them, because my father couldn't bear to change anything. Or maybe he didn't want to risk anyone finding something. I found my mother's boxes in the back of the closet, hidden behind old winter coats and wedding dresses. The medical records were at the bottom, tucked inside a leather bag I'd given her for her birthday. The papers were yellowed, but the handwriting was clear. Dr. Marcus Webb, Internal Medicine, Miami Memorial Hospital. I recognized the name immediately. He'd been a friend of my father's. He'd come to our house for dinner parties. He was the one who told us my mother's illness was unexplained but likely genetic. But here's where things get interesting. Buried inside those records was a single receipt, folded into thirds, from a lab called Independent Tox Screen. The date was 3 days before my mother died. The test? A full toxicology panel. And the result wasn't normal. It wasn't inconclusive. It was outside normal range, with a handwritten note, "Contact Dr. Webb regarding discrepancy in report." My hands were shaking as I held that piece of paper. Because if Dr. Webb had done a toxicology test, and if he'd hidden the results, then someone had something to hide. I didn't confront my father immediately. I'm not that stupid. I knew I needed proof, real proof, before I brought this to anyone. So I called in a favor from a friend in the medical industry, someone who could access old records without raising red flags. What she found made my stomach drop. Dr. Webb had altered the final report. He'd changed toxic levels detected to no toxins found. He'd added a note about autoimmune markers that didn't exist. And the icing on the cake? He'd gotten a 6-figure donation to his private practice from my father's company just 2 days after my mother died. That was when I knew. My father didn't just know about my mother's death. He was part of it. He'd covered it up. He'd let me believe my mother died of a mysterious illness while he wrote checks to make the evidence disappear. I spent the next week processing this, trying to figure out what to do. I could go to the police. I could call the press. I could destroy my family in a single press conference. But I had my half-siblings to think about. I had a company that employed hundreds of people, and I had a father who, despite everything, was the only family I had left. So I decided to do something different. I decided to fight Olivia and my father on their own terms. I started with small things. Changes in the company's financial reporting, audits that quietly diverted attention away from projects Olivia was spearheading. I built alliances with board members who'd been loyal to my mother, reminding them of the old days when the company was built on trust and transparency. Then I turned up the heat. I started leaking information, nothing criminal, just uncomfortable details about Olivia's spending habits, her mismanagement of foundation funds, the way she'd been using company resources for her personal projects. I made sure the rumors spread in the right circles, the ones where reputation matters more than money. For a while, it worked. Olivia started panicking. I could see it in the way she hosted meetings, the way she snapped at staff, the way she looked at me with a mixture of hatred and fear. My father was caught in the middle, trying to keep the peace, failing to notice that I was systematically dismantling his wife's influence. But then Olivia went on the offensive. She called me into her office one afternoon, my mother's old office, the one with the view of the bay, and she sat behind the desk like a queen addressing a peasant. "I know what you're doing, Elena," she said, her voice calm and measured. "I know you think you're being clever, but you don't understand the situation." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said. "I understand that you married my father for his money. I understand that you've been running this company into the ground since the moment you walked through the door. And I understand that you're terrified because I'm about to take everything from you." She laughed. It was a cold, hollow sound, the kind of laugh that makes the hairs on your arms stand up. "Elena, Elena, Elena," she said, shaking her head. "You have no idea, do you? You think I'm the villain in your story. You think I murdered your mother and stole your father, but the truth is so much worse than that." And then she said it, the words that shattered everything I thought I knew. "Your mother found out about your father's affairs. She knew about the women, the deals, the hidden accounts. She was going to leave him, take half the company, and destroy his reputation. So your father made a choice. He didn't kill her, Elena. He just didn't stop it." I stared at her, my mind refusing to process what she was saying. He knew about the stress, the depression, the way she was falling apart. He knew she was taking prescription pills and drinking wine on top of them. He could have helped her. He could have gotten her treatment. But instead, he made sure the doctors were paid off, made sure the records were altered, and made sure everyone believed she died of natural causes. My throat was dry. "You're lying." "I'm not lying. I was there, remember? Your mother was a broken woman long before I met your father. And when she took her own life, yes, she took her own life, Elena, with a mixture of pills and alcohol that made it look like an accident, your father was relieved. Because it meant he didn't have to pay her a cent. It meant he could keep his company, his reputation, his legacy." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to find my father and shake him until he told me the truth. But all I could do was stand there, frozen, while Olivia smiled at me. "You've been fighting the wrong person this whole time," she said. "Your father made me a deal. I would be his wife, his hostess, his arm candy. I would help him maintain his public image and raise his children. And in exchange, he would keep me very, very comfortable. That's all I ever wanted, Elena. Security, stability, a life where I didn't have to worry about money." I walked out of that office without another word. I went home and sat in my car for an hour, staring at the walls of my apartment, trying to figure out who I was supposed to hate now. My father, Olivia, myself for being so blind. But here's the thing about being the daughter of a real estate mogul. I know how to negotiate. I know how to make deals. And I know that sometimes the best revenge isn't murder, it's ruining someone's reputation. So I made a decision. I wouldn't expose my father. Not yet. First, I needed to understand what really happened. I needed to find my mother's medical records, her journals, anything that could give me the truth. And I did. I went back to the house in the Keys and searched every inch until I found it. A box of my mother's diaries hidden beneath the floorboards in her bedroom. She'd written about everything, the affairs, the lies, the loneliness. She'd written about feeling like she was drowning, like no one cared about her anymore. And she'd written about the night she decided she couldn't take it anymore. "I can't trust anyone," she wrote in her final entry, dated 3 days before she died. "Not even Victor. Especially not Victor. He's been poisoning me all along, not with arsenic, but with neglect, with silence, with the knowledge that I don't matter to him anymore. I'm not sure I want to wake up tomorrow." I sat in that room for hours, holding my mother's diary, sobbing until I had no tears left. I had spent 12 years hating Olivia, blaming Olivia, trying to destroy Olivia. And while she wasn't innocent, she'd known about everything, she'd enabled everything, she wasn't the one who killed my mother. My mother killed herself because my father made her feel worthless, because he cheated on her, because he never showed her the love she deserved. Olivia had told me that my father made a choice not to help her. But I needed to hear it from him. I needed to see his face when he realized I knew everything. So I invited him to lunch, just the two of us, at a restaurant we used to go to when I was a kid. A place where we would laugh and talk about nothing and everything. "Dad," I said, after we'd ordered. I found Mom's medical records. I know about the toxicology report. I know about Dr. Webb, and I know you were involved. His face drained of color. For a moment, I thought he was going to deny everything. But then he put down his fork and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before: regret. Real regret. Elena, I don't know what you've heard, but don't. Just don't. I know about the affairs. I know about the hidden accounts. I know about the way you made her feel like she wasn't good enough. And I know that you let her die because it was convenient for you. He shook his head. It wasn't like that. I loved your mother. I loved her so much it scared me. But she was sick, Elena. Not just physically, mentally. She was paranoid, obsessive, convinced everyone was out to get her. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to help her. You could have hired a therapist. You could have listened to her. Instead, you paid off her doctor and made sure her death looked like an accident. Elena, please. Tell me the truth, Dad. Tell me what happened. He sat in silence for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. She came to me one night. She was crying, telling me she couldn't do it anymore. She said she felt like a ghost in her own life, like no one saw her. She said she loved me more than anything, but she knew I didn't feel the same way. And then she told me she'd found someone else, someone who made her feel alive. Wait, what? She had an affair? Your father nodded. She was going to leave me. She said she couldn't forgive me for what I'd done, and I couldn't forgive myself. I was going to tell you everything, but then she got sick, and then she died. And I realized that maybe this was the best ending for everyone. I couldn't process what he was saying. My mother, the woman I'd idealized for 12 years, had been having an affair. My father hadn't just been the neglectful husband. He'd been the one who drove her into someone else's arms. You're telling me that Mom cheated on you? He shook his head. I'm telling you that our marriage was already over long before she died. I'm telling you that I made mistakes. And I'm telling you that Olivia was the one who helped me see clearly. She was the one who made me realize that I couldn't keep living in the past. She was the one who saved me. So there it was, the truth, ugly and complicated and completely devastating. My mother wasn't a saint. My father wasn't a villain. And Olivia despicable. Calculating Olivia had been the one to pick up the pieces after my father's world fell apart. But that didn't excuse her role in covering up my mother's death. It didn't excuse my father's lies. It didn't bring my mother back. So I made a decision. I wouldn't destroy my family, but I also wouldn't let them get away with everything. I would find a way to honor my mother's memory not by seeking revenge, but by living the truth. By being honest with myself about who she was and who my father is. And I started with this. I set up a fund in my mother's name to help women struggling with depression. I made sure it was independent of the family business. I named it Isabella's Light, and I gave it everything I had. Because that's what my mother would have wanted, in the end. Not revenge, not destruction. Just the truth, and a way to help others who were suffering the way she did. Am I in the wrong for deciding not to pursue revenge? For letting go of the anger that's defined my life for 12 years? I don't know. Maybe I'm still trying to figure that out. But here's what I do know. The truth is complicated. People are complicated. And the only way forward is to accept that and try to make the best of whatever comes next. So here I am, 3 months later, sitting in my apartment in Miami, looking out at the ocean that my mother used to love. I've got a glass of wine in my hand, and a diary in my lap, my mother's diary, the one I found under the floorboards. I've read it a dozen times now, and every time I find something new, something that makes me understand her a little better, something that makes me forgive her for leaving, something that helps me forgive myself for not seeing the truth sooner. I confronted my father and Olivia together last week. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I told them what I knew, what I'd found, and what I'd decided. I'm not going to expose you, I said. I'm not going to destroy the company or your reputation, but I am going to tell you this. I know what you did, both of you, and I'm never going to forget it. The foundation in my mother's name is independent. My shares in the company are non-negotiable. And if either of you ever tries to hurt me or anyone I love again, I will make sure everyone knows the truth about what happened to my mother. My father looked relieved. Olivia looked defeated. And for the first time in 12 years, I felt like I had some control over my own life. I still don't know if I made the right decision. Am I in the wrong for not telling the police? For not fighting harder to bring justice to my mother? Maybe. But I've realized something important. Justice isn't always about revenge. Sometimes it's about moving forward, about healing, about finding peace. I've also realized that I need to stop holding on to the past. My mother is gone. My father made mistakes. Olivia was complicit. But I'm still here, and I still have a life to live. I can't keep letting my mother's death define me. I have to let go, so I've decided to move on. Not forget, never forget, but move on. I've started therapy, started writing, started letting myself feel joy again. It's not easy. Some days are harder than others, but I'm trying. If you're going through something similar, if you're holding on to pain that's been rotting inside you for years, I want you to know you're not alone. You don't have to forgive the people who hurt you, but you do have to forgive yourself. You have to let go of the guilt, the shame, the anger. You have to find a way to live your life without letting the past destroy your future. And that's what I'm doing, one day at a time, one step at a time. I'm not perfect, I'm not healed, but I'm trying. And that's all any of us can do. So tell me, if you were in my shoes, faced with the same impossible choices, would you have handled it differently? Would you have sought revenge? Or would you have walked away? Let me know in the comments below. Because honestly, I could really use some perspective.